What is Cameroon? Presentation of historic events regarding the land and peoples. At the beginning, 500 years BC, the African explorer Hanan talked about the country of the chariot of gods. While reaching the borders of the country, the Mount Faco is in eruption. Cameroon, which may be a derivative of the Portuguese term Rio das Camarões, is named after the mouth of the Wauri River, rich in shrimps. But new researches seem to state that the country existed already and had the name Cameroon, a word that can be traced to ancient Tamil, which derivative is spoken in India today, as well as by ethnic groups in the Mandara Mountains of North Cameroon. The Mandara Kingdom was depicted in the maps of Frau Moro in 1459. A geographer monk, from Venice. Kama meaning love, and Ur meaning land, village or city. It's not far-fetched to believe that the land would have very well been marked as Cameroon in old maps held by Europeans explorers. But, with their mania to always claim new findings, Portuguese who arrived in Cameroon in 1470 simply would have made off the new name, or misspelled it to Camarões, words of their language. Anyways, they named the river, not the land. The history of Cameroon didn't start with colonization, just like the history of blacks in the Americas didn't start with slavery. It's hard to believe that the history of Cameroon started with the colonization. The few in the coast, who sought English protectorate, and eventually ended up with Germany in their land, were trying to protect not only their village, but a bigger entity well known they have been interacting with for millennia. The hinterland. From the 16th to 19th century, English Pidgin was the main trade language among the diverse population. Due to the huge linguistic diversity of Cameroon's tribal kingdoms, Germans had to train and instruct native troops in Pidgin English. Centuries of British presence in West Africa had spread their language along the coast. Pidgin was also chosen by colonial powers because it would keep population from knowledge and dangerous foreign ideologies, like socialism and Marxism. From 1901 to 1911 with the Treaty of Fez, following the coup of Agadir, the country will grow its territory. On November 4, 1911, Germany recognized French protectorate in Morocco, receiving in return territories in the French Equatorial African colony of Middle Congo, part of the now Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic, Gabon and Congo-Brazzaville. This land, known as New Cameroon, became part of the German colony of Cameroon, and part of German West Africa. Although, it only lasted a few years until it was captured by French, Belgians, and English allies, during the First World War. As part of the Fez Treaty, Germany as well ceded to France a small area of territory in the southeast of Fort Lamy, now part of Chad, a piece of land that formed the elephant nose of Cameroon. With the settlement following the coup of Agadir, the territory goes to over 760,000 square kilometers in a heartbeat. At the end of the First World War, Cameroon will have valiantly resisted the German occupation, losing leading figures of its liberation such as Martin Paul Samba, Douala Mangabel, Ngoso Den, on August 8, 1914, and the chief Likenie of the Kpé of Buea, a few years before, during a revolt, which saw the city razed to the ground by Major Hans Dominic's troops. Anti-German feeling in the population will help the swift defeat of Germany in Cameroon. By March 1916, Cameroon is free for 3 years. The Society of Nations watch over. The war is still wreaking havoc in Europe. The hunt for colonies is a vector of war. The French and the English then begin to dismember Cameroon. France recovers the territories of the Treaty of Fez, and keeps the elephant's nose, which stay with Chad, which is part of its colonial empire. The rest of the country is occupied militarily by French and English troops, who widen the frontiers of their colonial empires, even before the territory was entrusted to them under mandate by the League of Nations. On July 10, 1919, a de facto colonization starts. Cameroon or Cameroon sandwiched between the British colonial empire in the west and the French colonial empire in the east, has succeeded to survive, while all its leaders had been killed during the German occupation. As army, the country has only a few soldiers, who contributed to the First World War, on the side precisely of the English and French, and of course a handful of men who had supported Germany before rallying. But, several tribal fighters, were ready to fight again, against a new occupation. The mandate signed on June 28, 1919, becomes effective, on July 19, 1919. What was to be a guardianship, which would have allowed the country to self-determine as quickly as possible, becomes a complete colonization, that lasts more than 40 years, with all the horror that one knows. After the Second World War, the need of freedom, for African population is overwhelming. Colonial powers, are using money sham to keep their empire. A referendum to become a part of Nigeria, a British backyard, was held in northern Cameroon occupied by England, in November 1959. Voters had the choice between either connecting to Nigeria, or postponing the decision to a later date. The voters decided with 62.25% of the votes, to postpone the question. The status quo was normal, the country had already lived its first hours as a nation. Even under German dominion, since at least 1890, date of the first administrative tracing of the country, which equated to the same map of the country in 1959. With the exception of the elephant trunk. In 1961, 15 months later, a new referendum is held. The mostly Muslim northern Cameroon, occupied by England, rejoined Nigeria after shady deals, despite the fact that the newly elected president by the parliament, and supported by France, is a Muslim. Both France and England agreed to divide and conquer the land of the braves-hearted, which since 1948, fights the colonial power in a war of 24 years, which will make 500,000 dead. The seed of division is sowed. From then nothing will never be the same between Cameroon and Nigeria, and the so-called Anglophones and Francophones. Wars between the two countries, and social unrest between the new artificial ethnicity, Francophone and Anglophone, the bone of contention, will rock the nation over and over again. After losing a part of Cameroon to Britain, French will try to get even with the British. During the Biafra War from 1967 to 1970, France will militarily support Biafran secessionists. So far, 3 republics were not enough to erase the stigma of colonization. Normally the Federal Republic was the reunion after the 2 wars and colonization. The United Republic was to seal the unity. And the Republic of Cameroon had to resolutely turn Cameroonians to face the future together. If no Cameroonian has no feeling in its mind about how good it was, it is, and will be, to be a Cameroonian, maybe it's time to stop the venture there. It's necessary to look at yourself in the mirror, without yet going in the wall, where the mirror is hung. Politicians sell the illusions that the people buy with their disillusionment. We know the sum of the gross domestic product, but what is the sum of the product of living together? Do you need a decree to love your fellow citizens? In 1961, a part of northwestern Cameroon assimilated to Nigeria, without ever having the state status, in a country governed by federalism. Can Cameroonians realize the challenge of building a strong nation in its diversity, with its 280 ethnic groups and languages? It is not the system that makes men, it is the men who make the system. To believe in a systemic entity that would solve all the problems is to shirk its responsibilities.